Hey, what's going on, everybody? First, I would like to say thank you for clicking on this video and joining me on this journey. If you haven't already liked and subscribed to the channel, go ahead and click that button below and subscribe to the channel. Ring that bell so that you can get notified every time I release a video. And today I'm going to introduce you to our next educator of the week. Without further ado. All right, today with us we have Miss Ayesis Clay. She is a wife, a mother, an actress, director, educating artist. I mean, you wear so many hats, and I know you've toured different locations across the U.S., helping others forge their individual and collective voices. I'm so excited to have you on the show today, and just kind of tell us about yourself, your journey, how you got started with teaching.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Brianna. My journey through teaching is probably, I don't know if I would say that it's atypical, but I went to school for theater. So I was a theater major, and I graduated, and love got me early, and I got married and I had babies, and it became increasingly hard to support a family on, an artist's salary, especially a beginning artist's salary. So I fell kicking and screaming into education. A friend of ours had told us about a job opening for the Maryland Department of Juvenile Justice. And there was only one, us being my husband and myself. My husband's also a teacher. And there was only one position. And he had been a teacher before, and I don't know what possessed me to go, but we both went up for the same job. And they ended up creating a position for me. They hired him in that position, and they created a position for me based off of my background. And they thought that the children and the students in the Department of Juvenile Justice could benefit from some arts. And so that's how I started. They threw me in the fire and I loved it.
Wow, sometimes the best experiences are being thrown in that fire just to see if you can sink or swim in that environment, and you definitely have swam very well. So, what would you say were the positives of being an educator in that position?
So in that position specifically, I was with Department of Juvenile Justice for 4 years, and in that position, it's so unique because the students are actually at the facility. They are waiting court dates, they're waiting placement into group homes. And so you get an opportunity to really dig deep into mentoring students. Mm-hmm. And I found that I love that. I tell everyone that my teaching superpower is connection. Early on when my pedagogy wasn't that strong, because again, I didn't know what a teacher was, how to teach. My connection was always strong. And so that was one of the best aspects at that position. But unfortunately, because of that, and because of that strong mentoring students who were experiencing massive amounts of trauma, and not having these skills, not being taught how to mentor students without taking on that heaviness, I began to burn out really quickly and really start suffering from secondary traumatic stress. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that's what it was. So I ended up leaving there and then moving to the other end of the spectrum, which was a performing arts high school. And I stayed there for 15 years. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. And you said something very important. You said, although you may not have had the background knowledge, one of your superpowers was the whole connection. And so how were you able to develop that connection with your students?
Yeah, so I think by first and foremost, looking at them as people, and not as students, like literally looking at them as people. I remember having a conversation with my husband fairly early on that I wanted to be the teacher that I needed, and my background was completely different from the young people who were in the juvenile detention facilities, completely different, but they were still people. And recognizing that they still had wants and needs, and they were still going through probably one of the toughest times in their lives. And just being able to empathize with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. And then you also mentioned, because you had such a deep connection, you took on that, trauma that those students had experienced, and I believe that's a story that a lot of teachers have, with that secondary trauma stress. So how would you say that teachers can identify that that's actually happening to them, so that they're aware of it and can, get the help that they need, that you've been able to do?
yeah, excellent question, Brianna. Excellent question. So I'll start with how I realized it. A lot of times we think that it's just burnout, and I'm going to use air quotes with just burnout, because burnout is a huge thing. But we think that we're just tired. We're just, the system has beat us down or whatever, and we're just tired. But if you find yourself as one of those teachers who the students come to and they confide in, or you find yourself dealing with a population of students who have high instances of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And usually you'll find those in like the larger cities, not necessarily, not always the larger cities, because there was a lot of high ACEs in my hometown, which was like I said, a very small hometown, a small town, rural town. But if you find yourself doing that and you find yourself worrying, secondary traumatic stress is more about fear and worry. So when I was in the classroom, especially in the latter years of my teaching, because it didn't just stop when I left Department of Juvenile Justice, it actually increased when I went to the public high school. But I found myself worrying all the time, losing sleep over, oh my gosh, is this child okay? Is this child safe? Did this child eat? And then I found myself really almost being afraid to watch the news, because I just knew in my gut that one of my students, their names would flash across the screen, in some sort of accident or some sort of something that has happened. And so secondary traumatic stress is about that fear. And so if you find yourself fearful, or the opposite end of the spectrum, not able to empathize at all, then one of two things. I am a huge proponent of therapy. Huge. It was the beginning of my recovery from it. But also boundaries, setting boundaries. And we all know that teachers are not so great for the most part at setting boundaries. And mainly it's because society assumes that we shouldn't have any. And so what I do in my work with educators now is teach them how to create and stick to those boundaries, how to create a self-care practice that really focuses on them. I go into schools all the time, and the amount of shock that I get when I'm delivering professional developments from teachers, when I say this professional development is not about the kids. Like literally 10, we'll talk about them sort of, secondary, but it's about you. And my philosophy is that teachers are at the center of education. When we put teacher mental health first, then student mental health increases, student scores and student achievement increases, but you have to make sure that your teachers are well.
Absolutely.
Whether it's from burnout or secondary traumatic stress or just plain old stress, we have to make sure that they're well first.
And I would definitely agree, because like you said, teachers are at the core of education. They're the leaders in that classroom, and all from 2 to 35, 40 eyes are, looking at them, and
Yep.
Kids are, they're pulling from them every single day, mentally,
Absolutely.
emotionally. And I definitely agree that that whole self-care piece is something that is important, but also overlooked when it comes to that professional development, because being personal with yourself is what makes people more aware.
Yeah. And it was crazy because for the past, I'd say maybe 3 years, the buzzword was social emotional learning, right? It's most social emotional learning across the nation. Yes, let's infuse everything for the students, social emotional learning. However, there was a huge blind side as far as what about the teachers' social emotional wellness? If your teachers are not well, how do you expect them to teach someone how to be well?
Yeah.
And, you know, it was putting the cart before the horse, and what it was doing was really burning, even more so burning out teachers, because they're like, and it was ineffective. Again, if I'm not well, I'm not going to be able to teach you how to do it, because it's just going to be lip service at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what would you say is the best part of your job?
Oh, definitely connecting with teachers, man. I love it. When I left the classroom, that was my fear. It's like, oh, there's nothing like that moment when you close the door and it's just you and your students, and you are vibing, and they're sponges, and and you're trying different things. There's nothing like that. And I was afraid that I would miss that. And I do. But being able to increase my reach and really sit down and really connect with educators and help get them back into the ring, get them back into the fight. And definitely being able to help educators who want to stay in the classroom, because we're losing too many who just, it's not that they don't want to be in the classroom anymore. It's just that they don't have it. They don't have it mentally. They don't have it, health-wise. And so any little thing that I can do to kind of help them stay as the strong teacher as they are.
Yeah, you basically provide them those tools to build that house of a student that they have in their classroom. Now, you're also the founder of Sculpted Clay Productions. Can you tell us a little bit about being the CEO and founder of that company? What it is that you do?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to tell you, the younger me right now is like doing somersaults because I always wanted to own a theater company. My background in theater, I wanted to own a theater company. And so when I came out of the classroom, that was my goal. I was like, I'm going to own a theater company, and this is what I'm going to do. And then it became very clear very quickly that this theater company needed to have a very different path. And that path definitely is educational theater. So what Sculpted Clay Productions does is that they pair original productions with professional developments or residencies for schools to help deepen the learning process. So right now we have 3 productions. The first one is the solo show, which is Sculpting Clay, or How I Became Mother of Unicorns. And that's paired with unicorn teachers addressing secondary traumatic stress in educational environments. And so that is for all of the educators. We also have an original production for the middle school, high school crowd, and that's Standing on the Edge. And that is also connected with a residency. And then for theater for young audiences, there's The Monster at the End of This Play, which teaches about empathy and about their own social emotional wellness.
Nice. Now, how have you had to have adjusted with the whole restrictions in place? Are those productions still happening even during this time? And if they are, how are you able to produce those? Are they virtual or are they in person?
Yeah, great question. So the solo show, well, short answer is all except the theater for young audiences, all except The Monster at the End of This Play, are virtual. So we can do virtual or in person. As a matter of fact, I just came back from Arizona, where I delivered the solo show, and secondary traumatic stress system educators in person, but I've also done it virtually as well. So it depends on what the school system, where they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest difference in person is that everyone is spread out all over the room. And, there's a much wider distance between everyone, and everyone has masks, but yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. And so how did you get started with these programs? Where did the inspiration come from behind each one of those?
Yeah. So the very first one I wrote was actually Standing on the Edge. And that's the one for the middle school, high school age bracket. And how it started was I went back home and I found my journal that I had as a teenager. And it was so full of angst. It was so full of teenage angst. It's just like, oh. But as I was reading it, I realized that a lot of things that I was going through during that time period were things that I was mentoring students through, as an adult, as a teacher. And so, some things had changed, the digital era and online bullying. We didn't necessarily have that when I was growing up, but I realized that. And so I wanted to write a piece in honor of that. And so it's about 5 students from the moment they step into high school to the moment they leave high school, and the things that they encounter along the way, and how they overcome sometimes, and how they take missteps sometimes. And then the residency afterwards really goes into that and talks about that, and talks about, what missteps have you taken, or do you think that you've taken, or, and how can we rectify it? The solo show was first written as a love letter to my students when I left the classroom. That's what it started out as. It has completely morphed since then into my journey as dealing with secondary traumatic stress, and through the lens of a hero's journey, because I'm a bit of a nerd and I love fantasy novels, I love fantasy movies, the genre period. And so the background of it's like this dual journey, what's happening in real life with me, and this fantastical journey that I've created, and I'm making things, seeing things through this fantasy lens as I go through secondary traumatic stress, as I go through the highs and lows of education. So there's that. And then, and the last one, my favorite book, I say to this day, my favorite book is the monster at the end of this book. So I don't know if you remember those little golden books. They're like when you were little, they were, the company is called Little Golden Books, and it was Sesame Street. And so it's Grover, and he's like, oh my gosh, there's a monster at the end of the book. Well, anyway, it's kind of a play off of that, where at the end we find that it's really the audience who's the monster, with all the eyes and all the teeth, and they're smiling, they're not grimacing. So
nice. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I also want to give you an opportunity to either share an excerpt that you have from one of your programming, or one of your plays, or if you would like to show us a nice quick clip.
Sure. Right. Absolutely. All right. Can you hear it?
Yes, I can hear it.
so that was Sculpting Clay, or How I Became Mother of Unicorns. And again, it's attached to it's a standalone. It can be a standalone piece. I've performed it as a standalone piece, but nowadays I like to attach it to the professional development. And it's I talk to principals all the time. I was like, it's very out of the box, because 9 times out of 10, you haven't had a professional development that begins with a play. Mm-hmm. And so yeah.
It was very powerful, and without even the words, the one word that comes to my mind is energy. I mean, you bring energy to the stage, and I can just tell that your stage presence is very strong. And although you couldn't hear it, I could see the emotion that comes out of your stage presence that makes it realistic. Every emotion, every scene, I seen that, I felt that all through just watching that small clip. So how can, I know the screen was up where people can contact you, which we'll make sure that's also available. What would you say is the best way to contact you?
So the absolute best way to contact me is either through my email, and it's Ayesis, Ayesis, and it's at Sculpted Clay Productions with an S.com, or social media. You can always find me at Sculpted Clay on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Clubhouse. Yeah, it's all at Sculpted Clay. But I'm always looking for opportunities to meet new educators. I don't know if it's okay to say or not, I have an upcoming workshop called Right to be Heard. And it's specifically for teachers, for them to write their teaching story as a form of healing, kind of like what I did with my play, my solo play. They don't have to write a play. It can be, whatever. But it's for those teachers who are looking for an outlet, a creative outlet, to help deal with some of the challenges that they're facing right now in the classroom and in society.
Awesome. How can they register for that?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, and it's www.sculptedclayproductions.com/right to be heard. And all of it is spelled exactly how it's normally spelled, WRITETOBE, heard, right to be heard.
All right, awesome. And then what advice do you have for people who are watching?
My biggest advice to any educators, whether they're teachers, whether they're principals, school leaders, school staff, is to really protect your mental health. Protect your mental health. We do an amazing, amazing job, an amazing, important job. And in order for us to continue to do that, there has to be boundaries put in place, and you have to put yourself first and not feel bad about doing it. And not feel bad. And that's the thing. Don't feel guilty about putting you first. Because when you do, your students will get so much more out of the experience.
Absolutely. That was some awesome words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. And in the words of Maya Angelou, she says, "Nothing can dim the light which shines from within." And I will say that you, Ayesis, are the light that you are shining on this world. The light that you're bringing into this world is truly making a difference, first within yourself, but also within those that you impact through your theatrical experiences and in your encounter. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I want to wish you the best on your endeavors, and I'm definitely looking forward to working with you more in the near future.
Same, Brianna. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thanks for watching. Remember, you have what it takes. Be great and accelerate. Until next time, peace.